Hi, this is Damien me AtHope, and I am an axiological atheist, which can simply be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. And this is number 3 in my atheist activist training schedule. And so today we're going to talk about navigating the discussion, controlling the questions, and turning the argument. And I'm here today with Shayna, my wife, an intellectual giant in her own right, who's going to help me with questions and also the info for this video, so we can be a little more interactive. So let's go. So my atheist activism is a call to mental freedom for the world and a championing of others' self-mastery. This attempt to liberate the world is an act of kindness, to try to help free the mentally enslaved, or actually inspire them to free themselves. Sometimes a heart of kindness is all I have, my only weapon to fight for humanity in a world which is so seemingly intent on harm.
Damien, how can you be so nice and kind?
It is hard indeed, but it also shows high character, as to me, an act of courage to be kind in an unkind world. But I am not this world. I aspire to much greater, higher heights. I reject this world's unkindness. I fight for what is true, helpful, good, and right. All themes needed for universal betterment and human flourishing. I fight for people, not against them. I wish to be a friend to the world, as you can better persuade people with an open hand than angry words. I appeal to their reason as a helpful counselor, a mentor, a teacher, that would see their possible frustration as a thing in them, not truly a thing meant for me. I know I cannot change things with more of the same. Rather, we must be the hope and the change, so profound that it is like we no longer are holding a reality position of the strife before us. This is because we have to have the skill to aid others, the gift of human kindness, as with what we are the most then effective. And to me, kindness is invaluable. I just never stop seeing others as equal dignity beings. We rise by helping each other.
Damien, for my atheist videos, I can't do the kind thing. I watch you do it in every video, which is, I never see anger from you. How can you do that?
I think of my goal, which is to help others. And doing that, I can better control my feelings. I do get angry often, but I strive to not express this in my behavior. I wish to be a friend to the world, as I have already said. It has been a life's work indeed, years of counseling and self-improvement. I now see the value, though, of kindness. If you are a religious believer on faith, may I remind you that faith in the acquisition of knowledge is not a valid method worth believing in, because what proof is faith of anything a religion claims by faith, as many people can have different faith even in the same religion? I value good belief etiquette, reasoned belief acquisitions, good belief maintenance, and honest belief relinquishment. Good belief etiquette is disciplined rationality. It's addressing the ethics of belief. An honest thinker would want to know what is sufficient evidence for the reliability and validity to support a belief. Beliefs should be open to revision, have been scrutinized before believing, needing a valid and reliable reason and evidence. But then you have most religious believers who accept beliefs with no proof at all, just empty faith. Stubbornly, they adhere to religious beliefs, which are either completely unsubstantiated, unproven beliefs at best, and outright myths and lies otherwise. Such religious beliefs are not at all open to revision to them. Either they are shallow thinkers that are quite flexible, and just how the beliefs are acquired, so too the current religious go unscrutinized, just as they did before believing their beliefs to begin with. And faith, the mental infection of critical, clear thinking, continues to, in a sense, override or be unrequired of this scrutiny that all things should have before believing, and the need of valid and reliable reason and evidence. To me, it comes down to the question, would you be intellectually honest enough to want to know if your belief was completely false? And once knowing it was an unjustified belief, realize its lack of warrant and the qualities needed for belief retention, as well as grasp the rationality that comes in the need for belief relinquishment due to a belief's insufficient supporting reason and evidence. May I always be a truth seeker and not a blind believer. Thinking is good, and anyone claiming otherwise is indeed a person erring in reason. The act of believing, just because one wants to believe, when everything contradicts the belief, is intellectually unethical or deluded. Beliefs are directly connected to our behavior. Behavior is directly involved in ethics, and ethics requires involvement in social thinking, which requires us to mature or be disciplined our beliefs. I am not just an atheist disbelieving in claims of God. I am also a rationalist, valuing and requiring reason and evidence to support beliefs or propositions. Why are gods even concerned with belief built on faith? As if they truly wanted it so bad, they would be real. And being more than just mental projections, of which they are now, they would show themselves, and we all would then believe. Therefore, we can rightly conclude with no evidence of them at all that the belief in gods is the thinking person would do to play a reality game of values, that understanding the actual nature of reality doesn't lead us to a God conclusion. This brings up for me the truth navigation, which is a style that I basically modeled off of a lot of my wife's just natural techniques, because she's very gifted at asking questions and thinking about arguments without actually having the philosophy that I have added to it. I do it thus a truth navigation. They're both inquiry questions as well as strategic facts in a tag team debate of motivational teaching, which is in a sense what my wife helped me learn from the beginning. One of the first things I thought was that a thing about Haagen-Dazs that was inaccurate, and my wife basically said, what am I talking about? How do I know that? And why is what I think I claim to be, validly justified or justified in a sound way? And it found out that it actually wasn't, and that's what got me into thinking that I need to investigate what I'm talking about. So the important thing in atheist debating is to compare ideas and not people. Attack thinking, not people. In this way, we have a higher chance to promote change, because it is the thinking we can help change if we address the thinking and don't attack them. My eclectic set of tools, which I call truth navigation, which are techniques for discussions or debates, involve the hammer of truth, which is ontology, epistemology, and axiology, the methodological use of philosophy. REMS, which stands for reason or rationalism, evidence or empiricism, and methodological truth-seeking skepticism, which is generally called melodic doubt. The basic or general approach that I try to use as far as like tag teaming facts and then reason against them or against an idea. And dialectical rhetoric, which is truth persuasion, the use of facts and reason in a way of motivational teaching. And then utilizing dignity. Strategic dignity attacks or dignity enrichments, though only used if confusion happens or resistance is present. Some people will be open to thoughtful, unemotional, honest discussions in atheist activism. If so, then just start with the hammer of truth or REMS. However, others may be combative or overly emotional and likely could be closed-minded thinkers, emotional thinkers, or dishonest thinkers that may take a little more work to reason with. Often in street atheist activism, it is more people wanting to challenge us than a desire for open explanation. Thus, if we wish to be educational, informative, even thought-changing, we must approach it as helpful teacher and not a combative opponent. Here are some ideas on how to manage these harder people to talk to. The street atheist activism challenger will commonly be a theist who starts in on us in one of these three main ways. I will first address them and then we'll talk about them. Number one is the fact of for us to navigate the discussion. But the way that they're going to do this is the rusher and the gusher and the crusher. So the rusher, your job is to get them, in a sense, to understand you in a different way and to calm down. So the rusher comes at you hard, fast, and or angry with simple argument attacks. So your job, like I said, is to help them de-escalate and to think thoughtfully. An example that Shana will now read.
Why do you hate God?
I may say, I don't know what you mean by God. Please explain what you mean by God.
Another one. Why are you even out here as you don't believe anything? Atheism takes too much faith.
I may say, I believe things with sound justification. So please explain what a God is to you.
And then another example, atheism is arrogant. I would respect you more if you were an agnostic or even at least spiritual.
I may say, I am open to hearing your belief justifications. So please explain what you mean by God first. Then the gusher comes at you with lengthy personal experience arguments. Your job is to get them halted and thinking more generally. An example.
I have known God since I was 6 years old and have had many experiences. Let me tell you my life story. And after you hear my testimony, you will believe in my wonderful God.
I may say, okay, We can get to that, but do you believe everyone of your faith thinks the same or has had the same experiences?
Okay, example 2. I respect atheism, as you may have not had the many personal experiences I have had, or you would completely believe too. Here are just a few of the miracles from God that prove He is real to me.
I may say I am open to proof, but will you first tell me what is the common way people know something is real?
And third example, I feel for non-believers. I once was blind too, as you have to seek God to understand and experience God, to know Him. Here are my experiences to help you understand His miraculous power.
I may say, I understand you have personal experiences, and others of different faith have similar claims. So what makes people know which are real, possible proof? Then we get to the crusher, and comes at you with arguments to shut you down or prove you wrong. Your job is to get them redirected and thinking more personally. An example:
the existence of God is true because there is no proof that the existence of God is false.
This is actually an argument from ignorance. It's a logical fallacy that claims that the truth of a premise is based on the fact that it has not been yet proven false, or that the premise is false because it has not yet been proven true. And so our job is basically to get them to see that just because something isn't proven false is not a way of evidence for claiming that something is true or is even possible or that you even know what it is. And it still brings us back to the ontology question of what do you mean by God? Example 2.
Everything had a cause, thus God is the first cause of everything. Even the Big Bang, but God is either self-caused or has no cause.
So self-causation, or having no cause, is a special pleading argument. It is a logical fallacy, asking for, in a sense, an exemption to the rule to be applied to a specific case, their God. So everything has a cause, but God doesn't. That's a special pleading fallacy. Without proper justification, or why the case of deserving this exemption, therefore the proponents introduce a special cause or an exemption to their own rules. And their own rules that they agree is everything needs a cause, but not God.
Okay, example 3. Intelligent design, argument for complexity, or irreducible complexity of reality. Thus things seem designed or too complex to be by chance, thus God is true.
In simplest terms, this argument states that it is too complex, reality is, or things, people, humans, to have evolved naturally through natural selection of evolution. This is an argument from incredulity. It is a logical fallacy that occurs when someone decides that something did not happen, such as the non-God evolution, because they can't personally understand how it could have happened. As an example, creationists use some difficult to explain facet of biology as proof of their creator. Like they'll say the complexity of the eye. Contrary, though, to these instincts that many creationists have, the lack of an explanation does not justify offering whatever explanation one would prefer, like God did it. Intelligent design arguments from complexity or irreducible complexity are based on a fundamental misunderstanding of one of the most basic and important concepts of evolution. Mutations do not need to be useful for some ultimate endpoint in order to be selected. They just have to be useful, or at least not too harmful, for continued existence. It ignores the fact that evolution is non-thinking and blind. Understanding others. People will generally be defensive, especially so when you're out on the streets doing atheist activism. Therefore, you should strive to be friendly, thoughtful, rather than defensive back even to those defensive to you. Their goal will likely be about challenging you or winning for their ideas. Thus, strive to show them it is about sharing ideas and teaching. To me, I wish others self-mastery. Thus, do not feel a need to try to change people who may think differently. Rather, I wish to create a caring space, if I can, so they can see things differently if they wish. We need to realize there are different thinking states and how to navigate this. Feeling and emotional thinking. That is the least open to logic. You must help them move to a different thinking state to teach them more effectively. And feeling emotional is when people say like, my God, I've loved him, he's been there for me. These are emotional thinking. So you need to move them. Don't try to reason with someone logically who's talking in this way or thinking in this way. And then non-emotional thinking is a little more open to logic, but still it's better if you help them move to a different thinking state to teach them more effectively. And non-emotional thinking is simply they could just be talking, my God's this, does this, I read the Bible states. They're not really reasoning or thinking about what they're saying. They'll say, oh, well, God is true because a baby's smile proves that. That's not a reasonable thing that they would accept if I said, well, Bigfoot is true because there's animals in the forest. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So just because someone has non-emotional thinking doesn't mean it's reasoned thinking. And the next state is reasoned thinking. That is way more open to logic, but if you can help them move to a different thinking state, such as logic, to teach them the most effectively. And reasoned thinking may sound like, but reason, you can give reasons for things. It means that you've kind of analyzed and you're trying to support your ideas. But once again, fallacies are a form of reasoned thinking used in a sense, in an unlogical way.
But don't people use a lot of those fallacies, and there's lots of them, you can give an example, that they will think they're using reasoned thinking with those fallacies.
Oh, definitely. Like people will do straw man often. They'll say, well, you atheists think this. Well, that's already starting wrong, because the atheism is the rejection of a deity. Atheists may think all kinds of ways about that or around that or relating to that or a side that connects to that or whatever. But when you start, you need to know what, just like sometimes atheists will do this to theists. They'll assume that when someone says, I believe in God, that there's one universal kind of God, like say the God of the Bible. When someone, I've talked to a lot of people, they'll say, I believe in a God, and it's something more like pantheism or deism, or it could be some, demigod kind of a thing, or they'll say that we personally are God, it's our consciousness, it's something inside of us. So if we think that it's some external, all-knowing, all-powerful, all, benevolent or something, that may not be their conception. So straw manning to me is a very common, another really common one is when people attack other people instead of the argument. So they do an ad hominem fallacy of basically attacking, they'll say, your arguments are no good because you're evil and you're an atheist, So they
attack the person and has nothing to do with what you're talking about.
Correct.
They attack the person's character.
Right. Because you're an atheist, there's no way that you could understand morality. They'll say stuff like this. This is a logical fallacy. My understanding of morality, the social relationship behavior of pro-socially acting a certain way, is not related to the fact of there being a sky daddy or not. That has some kind of these rules that he believes you need to follow. And also, if that was the case, that was reasoned, you could then just turn it and go, okay, how do we know which of the verses of the Bible are teaching you morality?
Or Hindu, or Muslim,
right.
Or any of that. You could also get back to every religion has their own morality.
Correct. So this goes back to, in a sense, the last phase, which is logical thinking. Valid, sound, reliable arguments, as much possible, devoid of any fallacies, to a way of thinking. So logic thinking is the most open, obviously, to logic, understanding, and thinking, and will help you teach them the most effectively. Of course, it's also the hardest to get people to, and the rarest for people to be in naturally. And so to know what state they're in, and if you see them in a lower thinking state, try to aid them first in coming back up. I want a war of ideas where the loser is ignorance or hate, and the victor is kindness and a rational mind. Not another religious war with people, where the loser is always humanity, no matter the victor. What I hope for with my discussions or expressed ideas is not so much to strive to change people's mind, but instead I wish to inspire their mind to reason, and to thrive on logic and the search for what is valid and reliable evidence, as well as have a high standard in their ethics of belief. This ethics of belief is a burden of proof or a sound justification. I hope everyone adopts something like this: reasoned belief acquisitions, good belief maintenance, and honest belief relinquishment, or an ethics of belief, which I call belief etiquette. Logical thinking is the process in which one uses reasoning consistently to come to a conclusion. Problems or situations that involve logical thinking call for structure, for relationship between facts, and for chains of reasoning that make sense without contradictions. Logical thinking is the process in which one uses reason consistently to come to a conclusion. Problems or situations or relations must make sense in a reason chain. Controlling the questions. Making sure that you, as much as you can, either are asking the questions or controlling your answers so that it makes them question what they believe. Also, make short answers if possible, ending them with another question for them that makes them think or thoughtfully explain. Regardless of the type of discusser or debater, you should be a thoughtful questioner, as my wife has taught me, employing the hammer of truth questioning style. My hammer of truth, i.e., ontology, epistemology, and axiology, three philosophies that I use methodologically, a hammer of truth that builds and destroys. It aids in building accuracy towards the truth and destroys bad claims that are untrue. And just so everyone knows, that this style is basically the one that I watched my wife do many times without having the philosophy, in a sense, words to describe it. So don't feel bad if you don't, in a sense, know philosophy already. You only have to know these terms in relation to the structure of how you ask questions. So ontology is the thingness of things. Questions to define or compare and contrast thingness. Epistemology, the knowledge of things. Questions to explore or establish or confirm knowledge. Axiology, value, worth, goodness of things. Questions to valueize, value, judge, or establish and confirm value or disvalue, worth or disworth, as well as goodness or what is ungood. Hammer of truth is my folk name for the methodological use of philosophy, ontology, epistemology, and axiology questions to remove errors and add accuracy. We can be credible thinkers, or I should say, we who are credible thinkers should adopt rationality assumptions as necessity constraints on interpretation, as well as practical issues in addressing methodological problems faced by gatherers, ontology, inquisitors, epistemology, and judges, axiology. Taking down God assertions 1, 2, 3. 1. What is a God? An ontology question. How can one claim to know anything about a God? Epistemology question. Why is there value, validity, goodness, or worth in a claim that one knows anything about a God? An axiology question. Asking the right questions, ontology questions. What are you talking about? In other words, explain your claimed God.
So this ontology is no matter what the God, the religion, or whatever, you make them define down to the very detail what is their God.
Correct.
And then most people cannot answer what is a God.
Truly, I have not ever had anyone actually answer the question. Neither a philosopher nor someone on the street. They'll offer what they think is an explanation, and I'll show them why it's not. So they'll say, well, God is spiritual. And I say, well, okay, what do you mean by spiritual? So we go back to the ontology, the thingness of what the thing they're talking about. In other words, what are you talking about? The ontology question.
So really, if you can keep them focused, and you can remember and not get angry and everything, because they'll throw you off the set of giving them giving you the what is the God. If you can keep calm and keep coming back to this question, don't let them give you the fallacies. What is a God? Majority of the time, if I'm correct, they can't even get past those.
Right, which is, people say this is not good. This is actually great, because they'll say, I can't give you an answer, which is what you want, because when you first start talking to them, most people, you ask them, how much do you believe in God? They generally say 100%, or I fully believe, or I have no doubts. So the fact that you get them to admit from their own mouth, just by asking the correct ontology questions, I don't really know, or I can't explain, or better, I've heard them say, no one can explain this answer. This is great. It's not about winning. It's about aiding them in seeing the errors in what they thought they believed. So epistemology question. If they are somehow to offer something, or somehow I let them keep going, we can get to the how do they know that. So that they say, well, I know God is real because God has this feature and that feature and that feature because so say the Bible, or so say the Quran, or so say the Bhagavad Gita, or so say my spiritual teacher, whoever. You want to ask them, how do you know that, right? So what you're asking for is not just a claim, but you want to know the justification for what they're claiming as a God.
For evidence, they're facts.
They're facts. What they think, this is the reason. So the first is, what are you talking about? So what is the thing? Then they want to know, well, how do they claim to know that thing? Let's just say they don't say a Bible or a book or a Quran or whatever. Maybe they just say, I know it because I've felt God personally. So if they say something like this, then you need to go back to the ontology question. What do you mean by knowing it personally? Well, I hear God and see God all the time. Okay, let's first start with hear God. So when you say you hear God, are you saying that you hear a female voice? Are you saying you're hearing an adult voice? Are you saying you're hearing a voice with an accent? Does it sound loving? Is it loud? Is it quiet? You're asking the ontology questions. I want to know the details. Because when you force them to give these details, they're either going to A, lie, or be honest and say, well, actually, I don't hear it. I just it's in my mind. And so then I clarify, so what you're saying is, the ontology is that you're thinking it. So it's a thought. You're not hearing anything. You're thinking a thought, and then you're having a feeling in relation to that thought, and you put that thought and feeling as what you want to call God. So we want to clarify. This is also important too, because we don't want to also strawman them. We want to hear what it is they exactly, not what we interpret, but what they are saying. So always try to ask clarifying things, and then if can, state it. Is this what you're saying? It's very important because we don't want to straw man them. Also because we want them to own it. Because once they own a position in the sand, then if we show them that they can't actually justify it, can't establish it, can't, then they also can't run away from it. Because sometimes we'll go, oh, you didn't really get what I mean in an argument, and they'll give themselves an out. So doing this where it seems like tedious for us as atheists to go one little piece at a time because we may know a lot. And I know a lot about archaeology and all kinds of religions and philosophy, but ways of talking to people. But it's irritating at first to feel we got to do one little detail at a time. But actually, if our goal, like my wife has shown me, is to get people to think different, to actually start reasoning and being logical, even in a natural way, we have to be detailed. We have to ask these little questions. Because, see, when we ask these big picture generalizations or we allow people to offer big picture generalizations, they'll keep believing what they already believe. But when we start asking for the details of what they're claiming, they're not going to be able to do it.
Because this is the whole point right there, is because we assume with those big ideas and generalities, we all assume that we know what we're talking about. And like if I say what a God is, I assume you know exactly what a God is. But that's the whole deal. That's why conversations, debates, everything go wrong, because we assume we know what everybody's talking. Well, we're not born knowing, so we cannot assume that we know what they're saying. So that's why you have to keep going back to the ontology and break it down, detail down to detail, till you get to exactly what they think a God is, and then you can work from that, because then you both know exactly what you're talking about, and you're not assuming anything.
Right, and you're not using logical fallacies yourself, not strawmanning their ideas, and you're also forcing them to realize the ideas that they felt so sure about, they don't even know. They can't even explain, or they can barely explain. And to me, that is such a great thing, because we allow reason to enter their mind so they can, for the first time maybe in their life, honestly go, I don't know. Man, that is a powerful thing. For me, I had to realize I didn't know about the Haagen-Dazs, thing that me and my wife had talked about. When it started me down the road of wanting to justify what I'm saying and to know why I know that. And so this also brings us, to the axiology question. Why believe your justification? So the ontology question was trying to find out what you're talking about. The epistemology question is to go out to hear your justification. And then the axiology then is going to judge what is offered as the justification. So it's the desire for you to demonstrate the value. In other words, the accuracy, the warrant, the validity, the reliability, the soundness, or the truth of your justification of your claim God.
So what would be the axiologically the justification for someone who said, after they said they heard it, they hear it, they talk to them, and they, I know you can get them down and say, well, I just thought about it, but they still believe. So what would be the axiology justification?
Right. So they said they know what a God is, because they give some classification what they think God is, and then they say they know it. The reason why is because I feel it personally. And then you can go at justification by saying to them, well, you claim this is this, you claim to know it personally, and why is that a valid method? And how and what in that method are you saying that you have? Is that the same one that other people have? And is that a way, because let's just say they know it personally. Well, isn't that how a Muslim says they know Allah personally? Or Vishnu is known, or Shiva is known personally from the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedas? I mean, so you want to get, and even if that was the case, how about all the other gods? The question is not really about the gods. You're trying to hone in on, is it a valid method? Because axiology desires not to assume, but to know its actual substance. If you're saying that personal supposed experience is the justified, then you should be able to show why that's a good method. Why it's a reliable method. How valuable is this method they're claiming? Then also you want to understand it once they state that, how would they know its accuracy? Let's just say they feel it personally. Are you saying that you are the only one that feels it this way? Because I hear a lot of people from let's just say any of the world's major religions. They'll say, I know this, and yet look at how many, say Christianity. The Christians know the Bible is true, yet there's 150 or so versions in English. Well, why? Why do you need to keep explaining it if it's known so well? And then the other thing is that how come there's over 40,000 different denominations of Christian? Not that they're totally, different in every way, but they obviously are not the same. There's a difference. They'll say they have different, ways of perceiving the Bible. How can this be possible if the Bible is something that supposedly inspires this personal experience? If you really knew a God personally, if you said that was a valid way, then it would be the same. Would it not? How could you say that God gives it personally to believers, and then the believers don't believe the same? Something has to be in error. Obviously, at the minimum, it shows that personal faith belief is not trustable as a method.
It's not good. It's not valued.
It's not warranted. It's not accurate. It's not reliable.
So why would you want to believe that?
It's not demonstrative of soundness. So, a mock debate court, in a sense, using the hammer of truth. Ontology are reality, questions, or assertions. Witness gives evidence for the claim. Epistemology, truth, questions, assertion. Lawyer searches for warrant or justification in the claim. Axiology, goodness for, questions, assertions. Judge or jury assesses the value judges because of the qualities in or lacking in the claim. Turning the argument. The rational imperative. How do we know things? I am aggressive with ideas, but I am kind to people. My motto is attack thinking, not people. I do not respect religion, but I do respect people. I do not believe in religion, as it has a high potential for bad, or harm. But I believe in the potential of good in people. That is my style as a Firebrand atheist. That is also a humanistic person. Asking the right questions at the right time with the right info can aid them in seeing the need to change their mind if their ideas are lacking or in error. You can't just use facts all on their own. But remember, denial likes consistency. Don't let people read to you from their script or ideas. Stop their fixed pattern of this type of thinking. Open them up with thoughtful questions. As denial of logic is a pattern of thinking that cannot vary from its fixed standard of thinking. This is especially so if one is trying to hold ideas that are lacking or in error. Or if they do open their pattern of thinking, then they run the risk of new truth slipping in. Therefore, helping people altered, skewed thinking amounts to opening their thinking, which is indeed a large task of ontology questions. What are you talking about? Epistemology questions. How do you know that? And axiological questions. How is that justified, reliable, or logical? Which I label my hammer of truth. REMS. Reason, evidence, and methodological skepticism. reason for rationalism, evidence, empiricism, and methodological truth-seeking skepticism, melodic doubt, the basic general approach. Reason, evidence, and methodological skepticism. And just real quick, because people know, a lot of people say they're skeptics. Sometimes they're philosophic skeptics and not methodological skeptics. Philosophic skeptic basically doubts, say, truth, or doubts the ability to find truth, or may even doubt reality. Methodological skeptic is someone who, in a sense, doubts all ideas until they are justified. So it does believe in truth. In fact, it's truth-seeking. So we don't really, in a sense, need to defend atheism, to me, as much as present reason and evidence to why theism is unjustified, unwarranted, and found baseless, to the point that atheism is almost like a default conclusion. It is reasonable when the belief proposition of theism fails, as it always will. I have been told that me challenging or correcting people's religious falsehoods was harmful. I say, what? That responded, yes, just like challenging or correcting people's lies is harmful. Well, okay, it's harmful to the falsehoods, keeping their unjustified persuasive power, that is. My style when doing atheist outreach is basically to challenge with valid and reliable reason and evidence, with a reflective equilibrium to what appears to be, has some likelihood of being, or has some strong confirmation. The rationale of why reason is first is because you can't reason with them, and at times this is obvious a factor for or with some people. Just stop, as all things revolve around reason. Thus, roughly stated, and rationalism, which for me is reasonable use or applications of things in philosophy methods or tools like reason, logic, axiology, ontology, epistemology, etc. And empiricism, which is for me reasonable use or applications of things in philosophy or methods like evidence, facts, such as science, history, archaeology, etc., as well as navigating all this with my methodological truth-seeking skepticism, which is instead of philosophic skepticism, which is an approach, in the methodological skepticism is an approach that subjects all knowledge claims to scrutiny, with the goal of sorting out what is true from what is a false claim. To me, truth is an axiological value judgment presumption we place as a label on what we believe is evidence. Thus, we should be compelled to validate the warrant to believe value judgment we label as truth actually is supported with valid and reliable reason and evidence.
Which is where faith cannot be used as a validation, because it is not valid and it's not reliable.
It's not demonstratable. Faith is just a wish to believe something.
So faith is not truth.
No. Faith is a personal feeling. You could say, I personally feel something, but the personal feelings has no relation to actual what's in the world or not in the world. Presumptions have many forms of values, axiology. It may be described as treating actions as abstract objects, putting value to them. Fallacies of presumption, or unwarranted assumptions. The fallacies of presumptions also fail to provide adequate reason for believing the truth of their conclusions. In these instances, however, the erroneous reasoning results from the implicit assumption or supposition of some further proposition whose truth is uncertain or implausible, thus illogical. Again, we consider each of them in turn, seeking always to identify the unwarranted assumptions upon which they are based. So this addresses to me axiological presumptive value, that you presume something has value, that when you say something is true, there's some value to that statement, that it's justified. You can't say something is true and it's completely false. I am an axiological value theory atheist, and claims of God are a presumptive value failure, or also could be stated fallacy of presumption. Simply, if you presume a thing is of value that you cannot justify, then you have committed an axiological presumptive value failure. Axiological presumptive value success. A sound thinker uses disciplined rationality, which is a sound axiological judgment, the evaluation of evidence, to make a decision, a conclusion, supporting a valid and reliable justification. Axiological presumptive value failure. Shallow thinker, in other words, not a deep thinker. Undisciplined, situational, sporadic, or limited thinking, generally fallacies. Unsound axiological judgment, lacking required evidence to make a presumptive value success. Decision, lacking the support of a needed, valid, and reliable justification. So when assessing belief, one should generally think about justification and the correspondence theory of truth when we relate to things in reality. Something claimed as labeled as true is tested in relation to its sound justification to the warrant. Claiming something is known or believed is justifiably deserves to be called true, is just that, or should be acknowledged as accurately true due to valid and reliable because of evidence. As in, you can't claim to know the value of something you cannot demonstrate as having good qualities to attach the value claim to. So if you lack evidence of the thing in question, you cannot validate its value. To say otherwise is a presumptive value failure. This involves addressing the justification. Something unknown is thus uncountable for accuracy, requiring doubt, a lack of belief, or fully disbelief. Well, justificationism is what I feel I'm doing, but I also don't always use that word the way other people may use it. The other people use justificationism sometimes as its own method to understand things. To me, I just see it as a simple belief etiquette, that we should require a burden of proof, a justification for what is being claimed.
So whoever makes the claim has to provide the justification.
They hold the burden of proof, or the requirement for justification. So to me, a justificationism, in a sense, addressing the justificationism to me is basically that we are holding this burden of proof, or whoever is stating something is holding the burden of proof to justify it.
Because I know a lot of believers or religionists believe that they can just make their claim and then you tell them it's your burden of proof to prove it. No, and they go, no, it's your burden of proof to prove that I'm wrong, and that's not correct.
Right, that's a fallacy of burden of proof, yes. Yeah. So, theory of justification is a philosophy standard approach that regards the justification of a claim as primary, while the claim itself is secondary. Thus, criticism consists of trying to show that a claim cannot be reduced to the authority of its criteria or its appeals. To this idea, I use a use matrix. If I say that is of great use for that, can you validate its use or value? And can I use this as a valid method to state a valid justification for my claims without evidence of the value judged from? No. Thus, an axiological presumptive value failure is a valid anything. No. Theory of justification is part of epistemology that attempts to understand the justification of propositions and beliefs. Epistemologists are concerned with various epistemic or knowledge features of belief, which include the ideas of justification, warrant, rationality, and possibility. Probability. Loosely speaking, justification is the reason that someone properly holds a belief. When a claim is in doubt, justification can be used to support the claim and reduce or remove the doubt. Justification uses empiricism, evidence of the senses, authoritative testimony, the appeal to a criteria of authority that is valid, or reason, or rationalism. I like the correspondence theory of truth to analyze beliefs or statements, if they are true or not. People may think or analyze it in a similar way without knowing the term, the correspondence theory of truth, or the method, as it is reasonable and uses thinking that could equally be reached by critical thinking. The difference is having a go-to standard helps clarify thinking quickly with a higher accuracy. The correspondence theory of truth states that the truth or falsity of a statement is determined by how it relates to the world and whether it accurately describes, i.e. corresponds with, that world.
That means this world and this reality.
Right.
Not this reality and this magical heaven, hell, or any religious idea, because that is not reality. It's
right.
Not out in outer space or some alien. It means in this reality, in this world.
Right. It means that you can prove it, that you can demonstrate it, that you can show it. You can show, because to say accurate, you can't assume. You'd have to show some way of doing that. If you say that there's magic, well, then you have to demonstrate magic. In a sense, God is a super magic claim, which is ridiculous. We can't even see simple magic, let alone super magic. So correspondence theories claim that true beliefs and true statements correspond to actual state of affairs. Dialectical rhetoric, or truth persuasion, the use of facts and reasoning in motivational teaching. Navigate through reasoned arguments.
Navigate truth.
Navigate truth through reasoned arguments. Dialectic or dialectics, also known as the dialectical method, is discourse between two or more people holding different viewpoints about a subject, but wish to establish the truth through reasoned arguments. In philosophy, dialectic or the dialectical method, which some people think is connected to the Socratic method, but the Socratic method is actually a form of dialectic and not dialectic itself, implies a methodology use of examining and cognition of philosophy objects. Dialectical method demands the users to examine the objects in relation to other objects and or the whole system, and examine the objects with a dynamic, in a sense, evolutionary environment. Dialectical method usually consists with metaphysical or reality method, or contrast with metaphysical method, which examines the objects in a separate, isolate, or static environment. Dialectical method has three main forms corresponding to three, in a sense, developmental stages. Naive or native dialectic, emerging in ancient history, mainly relied on intuition and personal experience with limited supporting scientific evidence. Idealistic dialectic, which is a product of classical German idealism, reaching its zenith with works of Hegel, was the first system to form dialectical method. And materialistic dialectics, built mainly by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Anyways, it was the term dialectic is synonymous with the term debate. It's not synonymous with the term debate. In a sense, it's a form of truth-seeking type of questions that you're trying to get to its parts and pieces. In other words, kind of like what the hammer of truth does. So, while in theory debaters are not necessarily emotionally invested in their viewpoints, in particular in practice, debaters frequently display an emotional commitment that may cloud rational judgment. Debates are won through a combination of persuading the opponent, proving one's arguments are correct, and proving the opponent's arguments are incorrect. Debates do not necessarily require promptly identifying a clear winner or loser. However, clear winners are frequently determined by a judge or jury or group consensus. The term dialectics is also not synonymous with the term rhetoric, a method or art of discourse that seeks to persuade, inform, motivate an audience. Concepts like logos or rational appeal, pathos, or emotional appeal, ethos, or ethical appeal are intentionally used by rhetoricians to persuade an audience. Socrates favored truth as the highest value, proposing that it could be discovered through reason and logic in discussion. Ergo, dialectic. Socrates valued rationality, appealing to logic, not emotion, as the proper means of persuasion, the discovery of truth, and the determinant for one's actions. To Socrates, truth, not moral virtue, was the greater good, and each person should, above all else, seek truth to guide one's life. Therefore, Socrates opposed the sophists and their teaching of rhetoric as an art and emotional requiring neither logic nor proof.
So what's the whole big thing we're supposed to get out of dialect rhetoric then? Should we use it? Should we not use it?
Well, what I'm trying to say is we're already, in a sense, using it. It's that I believe that I do a type of dialectic that basically puts a truth-seeking like Socrates, but also I call it dialectical rhetoric, because to me we're using the dialectic itself, the truth-seeking sort of non-emotional, but we're using rhetoric in a different way. We're using it with facts and stuff with the reason. Then we're using the skepticism. So in a sense, it's sort of our explaining the other two things we're already doing in a sense. But it's the fact of doing the hammer of truth and the REMS, reason, evidence, and methodological skepticism. But it's trying to use truth-seeking at the same time as I believe that we should be doing rhetoric, the fact that we should be motivating and persuading people of its truth. And I think that Socrates did some of that anyways when he was saying that truth was the highest good. Well, that is his personal opinion, and thus he is in a sense trying to persuade you of its goodness. So, and to me, that there's nothing wrong with that. I think that actually that is what we should be doing, is persuade people of the ethics of belief, persuade them why it's best to live our lives this way. Not just think that we should be cold and unemotional. I think that we should actually see that we are emotional beings that are constantly doing that, and that's how we're emotional thinkers. It's not anything wrong with being an emotional thinker. What's wrong is it not allowing logic to, in a sense, guide us. We don't want to be emotionally hijacked. Dialectical rhetoric, to me, or the use of dialectics in general, is the focusing on not allowing this emotional hijacking. So when we use the dialectic with other people, we try to overcome their emotional hijacking and our emotional hijacking. Because they'll say they attack us. Our feeling is I'm getting attacked, being angry, to overreact, to want to defend myself. These are emotional hijackings. We should try, in a sense, to first address what they're doing. Don't get sidetracked by their fallacies or their anger or their opinions. Try to stay focused. Try to be dialectical in the fact that we try to remove our response, our emotionally hijacked.
So based on that, then really dialectic rhetoric is what we're really using this whole time we're talking with these people.
Correct.
It's like the big picture of everything.
It's our persuasion.
Our persuasion. So we do that, and inside that we're doing a hammer of truth. We're
yes.
doing all that. So really, dialectic rhetoric is the whole proof, the whole thing, the whole big picture. Okay.
Right, yeah, it's our whole persuasion of trying to stay like a teacher and not like a combative opponent.
Try not to let your emotions just try to get them back. You're trying to keep calm, get up and keep calm, and that's how everybody can have a good discussion and either learn off each other.
Exactly.
And help each other or help them reason better and everything like that. Okay.
Right, so I agree with him. We shouldn't be rhetoricians. Our goal should not be to use persuasion blindly just to try to, manipulate people. No, we use persuasion to see why something is valid. And then also persuading ourselves to not react or feel a need to defend ourselves just because we're attacked. Just try to stay focused.
The dialectic is always trying to seek the truth.
Trying to seek this truth and trying to seek the truth without the blinders of emotional hijacking.
But like you said, through the truth, establish truth through reason, arguments.
Correct.
Okay.
So then let's get to the rhetoric part, or the utilizing dignity. And strategic dignity attacks or dignity enrichments, only used if confusion happens or resistance is present.
Okay, I have a question. What do you mean by dignity?
Okay, well, I'm going to get into what dignity is. But dignity, in a sense, is our emotional sensitivity of self. So when you feel like what you're feeling is this sense of self. What happens is we go through life because we're emotional beings. We go through life and we feel this protected sense of self gets violated or gets threatened. And so a dignity attack is when that sureness or the confidence or that safety feeling is somewhat, disrupted.
Okay.
And to me, this can happen in an attack because often people have, when they say things, generally they feel really confident in their assertions. So they'll say something, but let me go back to reading also what a dignity enrichment is and a dignity attack. So utilizing dignity enrichment. One is accept thinking or behavior, show understanding, and offer support for who and what they are. And this happens like, say if someone goes, I really can't get this. A dignity enrichment will go, well, I believe you can. It's not that hard. You're talking to them. Or go, here's how you could do it. Or you could say also a dignity enrichment of, it was hard for me. That's allowing them to feel safe, to feel comfortable. And especially, to me, going back to dialectic, why I want it as the main persuasion or whatever, is because I want to be truthful. I don't want to say something that's false. If it wasn't hard for me, I need to think of another way of enriching them to make them feel okay. Don't lie. It's not about lying. Utilizing dignity should be, and how I'm saying it, is in a truth-seeking, still dialectical way. We should be doing dialectical rhetoric that we're still talking as truth, but we're trying to do it to aid them in feeling comfortable. Accept them. If they say, I think there's a God, you're not attacking their personal choice to think this. You're attacking the reason why they think this. So you can say, like, acceptance of thinking. Well, you have a right to think what you want. But have you ever thought if what you said was true? Or does truth not matter?
Okay.
So a dignity attack, challenge, critical challenge of thinking or behavior. So I do this a lot, especially for behavior, but I do it for thinking too. When people use like logical fallacies and you challenge that critically, you don't even have to say it's a logical fallacy. You just challenge its accuracy. In a sense, that's a dignity attack. They feel confident about the idea. You challenge that idea's confidence. That's a dignity attack to what I'm talking about. Or challenge their behavior. If they're being abusive, or say, aren't you desiring to be a truthful thinker? Don't you want to be an ethical debater? Don't you want to behave honorably? You're attacking their lack of being honorably. Shouldn't you want to be intellectually honest? You're challenged that their behavior is not intellectually honest. So you're holding them accountable. In other words, dignity attacks in that way. Expose confusion or irrationalism with dignity attacks. Offer rebuttal or rebuke of who or what they are, what they're doing, what the specific behaviors. Here is a rough breakdown of a response to an atheist philosopher on a debate over the term spiritual, saying to him, after he had said to me that he has good reasons for the term spiritual. And so I said, good reasons to believe in spiritual? And my dignity attack was, more like loose-looking thinking claim. And a dignity attack, also I stated, you will be quite hard-pressed to prove such a thing. I'm like mocking him in a sense. And a dignity attack. But as always, I am more than ready to receive your evidence substantiation. So I'm like mocking that he hasn't done that. So in other words, he said his opinion without his justification. He did an axiological presumptive value failure. He presumed something was good, he had good reasons for, but didn't actually give me the reasons. Dignity attack, I also said to him, he stated to me he was a philosopher and he teaches in college, and I said to him, a dignity attack, stating your education is great and still no evidence, then you have had training. And I also said a dignity attack, not that you employ your philosophy education with a universal truth to all claims. And I said to him a dignity attack, and I am taken back that you think you can push any claim against me without your full sound warrant. I want evidence, please. Attacking the person. Dignity is the emotional sensitivity of our sense of self, or the emotional understanding of our sense of self. When you say they have a right to what they believe, what I hear is you think I don't have a right to comment on it. I strive to attack thinking and not people. But I sometimes may use dignity attacks or even character attacks about behavior or thinking people are doing. I only say things that they can quickly fix or change, or at least I strive to. Then I will pressure them to start changing it. My point is doing this is to help mirror the bad or erred thinking or behavior so they can change it if they wish. I try to never do it to hurt anyone, as I see this as not a productive and potentially abusive. However, if I only spend my time pointing fingers, have I not wasted times I could have offered helping hands? Thus, even though sometimes things need to be harshly pointed out, so too is there a need to be involved in the benefit of helping where I can. And this is real important. Sometimes I get really frustrated with somebody, but I need to try to keep teaching them. But sometimes, if they're too resistant or they're a dishonest thinker, it's really better just to end, the conversation. Maybe the conversation will come another time. Maybe I'm not the right person, or it's not the right time, or maybe I'm just not in the right mood. We have to understand that we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I have all these ideas, and sometimes the greatest ideas go right out the window if you get emotionally hijacked. That's why it's important to try to do the dialectic and the fact of removing emotions as much as possible from hijacking you and trying to be about truth, even if you find out you don't have it. May I drive to help and not be somehow silenced just because there is a need to fight all that is wrong. I want to thank everyone throughout my life that have treated me with compassion and kindness. From something as simple as a smile to a comforting word, to things that create impact so big, like my wife, that are life-altering. You have written with the pen of love across my heart and have helped me to be a better person who strives to show and treat others with compassion as well as kindness. I do not respect faith, but I respect people. I value the sanctity of rights of each person to self-define their beliefs. I do not attack people because of what they believe. I say attack thinking, not people. We who truly value ourselves and others can and do make a better world. May we together fill the world with this shining example of humanity. When the valuing of dignity is followed, a deep respect for oneself and others as dignity beings has become one's path. When we can see with eyes of love and kindness how well we finally see and understand what a demonstrable and mature being of dignity, when we value the human rights of others, as we now see others in a world as fellow dignity beings, we need to understand what should be honored in others. Follow our fellow dignity beings and the realization of the value involved in that, as well as strive for and to understand how to attack a person's strive to understand and not to attack a person's human rights. And if you do so, it is an attack to the value and worth of a dignity being. Yes, I want to see you, that precious being of dignity, worth of high value, and an honored moral weight to any violation of this self-ownership. And this dignity being with self-ownership rights is there before you, seeking connection. What will you do? Here you are in the question of the ever-present, even if never said aloud. But do you see me now? Are you stuck in trying to evaluate my value? and assess worth as a fellow being of dignity? Dignity involves the emotional awareness or the emotional direction of the world, detection of the world. A violation of one's dignity as a dignity being can be quite harmful. Simply, we must see how it can create some psychological disturbance in the dignity being that is being done to. I am a mutualist thinker, and to me, we all are in this life together as fellow dignity beings. Therefore, I want my life to be a benefit to others. In the world, we are naturally evolutionary derived dignity beings, not supernatural magic derived soul spirit beings. Dignity arises in our emotional awareness depending on cognition. Our dignity is involved when you feel connected feelings with people. It can even be with animals, plants, places, things, or ideas. Our dignity is involved when we feel the emotional bond, my family, my pet, my religion, my sports team, etc. Because at the core of the sensitivity of our dignity, we feel that when we connect, then we are acknowledging, understanding, and supporting a perceived sense of dignity, even if it's not actual a dignity being. In the case of plants, places, things, or ideas, and is rightly interacting with a dignity being and people and or animals. In other words, things with feeling, which ideas do not have. We are trying to protect dignity, developing motivation towards them somewhere near equal, even though humans and animals do not have the same morality weight to them. To further discuss my ideas of dignity developing motivation can be seen in expressions like this: I love you and I appreciate you. Or the behavior of living and appreciating. However, this is only true between higher cognitive aware beings, as dignity and awareness of the sense of self are directly related to dignity awareness. The higher the dignity awareness, the higher the moral weight of the dignity in the being's dignity. What do you think are the best ways to cultivate dignity? Well, to me, it is not a fixed thing, and the being's dignity feels honored or honoring others, as well as helping, both self-helping and other helping, like ones we love or those in need, just as our dignity is affected by interactions with others. It's that sense of self, that comfort. We can value our own dignity, and we can and do grow in this way. But as I see it, it is because we are a social animal. We cannot fully flourish without our dignity. Thus, dignity sensitivity is emotionally needed for other dignity beings. And that is why I surmise, at least partially why we feel empathy and compassion or emotional bonds, even with animals, in a dignity awareness and response. Like when you say, my pet, or a cat. One is acknowledging our increased personal emotional connecting. So when we exchange an experience with a pet animal, what we have done is we have raised their dignity. Our dignity flourishes with acceptance, understanding, and support. Our dignity withers under rejection misunderstanding, and opposition. Dignity is the emotional sensitivity of our sense of self, the emotional understanding of ourself. When you say you have a right to what you believe, what I think is you feel I have no right to comment on it. To me, when you say it is wrong to kill a human, that person is appealing to our need to value the dignity of the person. The person with whom may possibly be killed has a life essence with an attached value and moral weight valuations. And moral weight is different depending on the value of the dignity being you are addressing. Understanding moral weight is a kind of response or right as it's actualized. So it is a dignity to which we are saying validates the right to life. But I believe all living things with cognitively aware have a dignity. As to me, dignity is the same. I hone to the emotional experience, emotional expression, emotional intelligence, or sensitivity at the very core of our sense of self. The more aware, the higher that dignity value and thus worth. Dignity is often similar to my thinking moral, ethical, and legal political discussions use the concept of dignity to express the idea that a being has an innate right to be valued, respected, and to receive ethical treatment. In the modern context, dignity can function as an extension of the Enlightenment era concepts of inherent, inalienable rights. English thinkers often use the word dignity, its prescriptive and cautionary ways. For example, in political, it can be used to critique the treatment of oppressed and vulnerable groups of people. But it has also been applied to cultures and subcultures, to religious beliefs and ideas, to animals used for food and research, and or plants. Dignity also has descriptive meanings pertaining to human worth. In general, the term has various functions and meanings depending on our use and its context. Dignity, authentically and integratedly, are of highest value to our experience. Yet one that must define ourselves. People of hurt and harm, you are not free to attack other beings of dignity without effect, even on you, as you may think. So I am not sorry, that there is no such thing in general as hurting or harming other beings of dignity without a psychological disruption to the dignity being in us. This is an understanding that once done hurt and harm of other beings of dignity emotionally and psychologically hurts and harms your life as an accepted, needy dignity being. As we commonly experience moral disgust involuntarily, as on our deepest level as dignity beings. Disgust is deeply related to our sense of morality. And all the above ideas are written by me. So anyways, I wanted to also end this by thanking my wife, Shana, who's a fellow atheist, anti-theist, anti-religionist, and secular humanist, and one of my mentors and helpers and thinking more accurately and detailed.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
All right. That's it for this video, and have a great day.